Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to today's press conference, the second of today's afternoon, and we are glad to have with us Mr. Xuan Changnen, Deputy Governor of the PBOC, to brief you on financial statistics in 2022 and take your questions. And we're also glad to have with us spokesperson of the PBOC, Director General of Statistics and Analysis Department, Ms. Ran Jianhong, and Director of the Financial Market Department, Mr. Ma, and Director of the Monetary Policy Department, Mr. Wu. First opening remarks from Mr. Xuan. Friends from media, good afternoon. In 2022, we faced impact from factors beyond expectation, both at home and abroad. Under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, the PBOC followed through on the decisions and instructions of the Central Leadership, the State Council, and Financial Stability and Development Committee, took stronger steps to enforce a prudent monetary policy and implement the policy package and follow-up measures for stabilizing the economy, making solid contribution to serving the real economy and ensuring overall economy stability. On the 10th of this month, we released the report on financial statistics of last year, and the report showed that last year we maintained overall stability in the financial market, and the financial services have provided strong support for the real economy. First, liquidity was reasonably sufficient and growth of total credit was more stable. In 2022, the PBOC cut the required reserve ratio twice, injecting over 1 trillion yuan of long-term liquidity to the real economy. We turned over 1.13 trillion yuan of profit to the state and injected liquidity through such means as relending, rediscount, MLF, and open market operations. This has helped provide a sound liquidity environment for overall economy stability. M2 increased by 11.8% year-on-year, 2.8 percentage points higher than the end of last year. RMB loans increased by 21.31 trillion yuan, 1.36 trillion yuan higher than last year. Stock aggregate finance went up by 9.6% year-on-year, and new aggregate financing was 32.01 trillion yuan, 668.9 billion yuan more than the previous year. Second, stronger credit support was provided for key areas and weakenings of the real economy, and the credit structure continued to improve. In 2022, the PBOC promptly released multiple structural monetary policy tools to provide targeted support for groups in difficulty and key areas. Outstanding medium to long-term loans lent to the manufacturing sector went up by 36.7% year-on-year, 25.6 percentage points higher than the average growth of all loans, and outstanding S&T innovation loans went up by was faster than 13.2 percentage points than average loans. Inclusive loans to small and micro businesses increased by 23.8%, which was 12.7 percentage points higher than average. And 565.2 million businesses received such inclusive loans, up by 26.8% year-on-year. At the same time, the PBOC guided relevant banks in using policy-based and development-oriented financial instruments to inject 739.9 billion yuan of funds and made full use of the 800 billion additional credit line, with a focus on supporting and promoting infrastructure construction. At the end of 2022, outstanding medium to long-term loans directed to infrastructure construction increased by 13%, which was 1.9 percentage points higher than the average growth. Third, overall financing cost of the real economy decreased notably. As European and North American major economies increased interest rates, the LPR reform continued to unleash dividends in China's loan market. And for the full year, the 1-year LPR and the 5-year LPR respectively decreased by 15 base points and 35 base points, helping us to reduce the overall financing cost of the real economy. In 2022, weighted average interest rate of new loans to enterprises was 4.17%, 34 base points lower than the previous year. At the same time, PBOC established a market-based adjustment mechanism for deposit interest rate, ensure stability for banks' liability costs. And last year, weighted average interest rate of new fixed-term deposits was 11 base points lower than the previous year. This year is the beginning year for implementing the decisions of the 20th Party Congress. The PBOC will follow the guidance of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, implement decisions made at the Party Congress and the Central Economic Work Conference, promote Chinese colonization, stay unwaveringly committed to the development of both the public and private sectors, pursue progress while ensuring stability, enforce a prudent monetary policy in a targeted manner, and focus on expanding effective demand and dependent supply-side structure reform so as to make more contribution to the growth in both the scale and quality of the economy. Now the floor is open to questions. Please identify your media affiliation before raising your question. From Reuters, the Central Economic Work Conference has stressed that this year's prudent monetary policy must be targeted and strong to ensure reasonably sufficient liquidity. So my question is, will there be further cuts to interest rates and required reserve ratio? Will there be a scale of structural monetary policy instruments? Thank you very much for your question. In my opening remarks, I mentioned that a prudent monetary policy will focus on better coordinating the expansion of domestic demand and supply-side structural reform. We will focus on supporting expansion of domestic supply and with reasonably sufficient liquidity will guide financial institutions to supply credit in a market-based and reasonable manner in accordance with law, and front-load credit supply at an appropriate scale to actively support fiscal and social policies. We will strengthen support for businesses in retaining and creating jobs and creating mass entrepreneurship and employment. Use multiple channels to increase the income of residents. But at the same time, we will not resort to massive stimulation and use balanced manners to keep the stability of growth, employment, and prices. At the same time, we will fully harness the guiding role of structural monetary policy instruments and continue to use supportive instruments for carbon emission reduction, special relending for S&T innovation to accelerate the development of modern industrial system. We will implement preferential policies such as lending tools for small and micro businesses to support the development of major infrastructure projects, energy, transportation, and water management projects, and strengthen financial services for rural revitalization. At the same time, now as we optimize COVID response measures and the recovery of economic performance, the confidence of micro entities will strengthen. We will take further measures to boost market confidence. We will take measures to help reduce financing cost for enterprises and the cost for personal consumption. Second, we will stay unwaveringly committed to the development of both public and private sectors and strengthen financial services and direct more financing to private small micro businesses in the manufacturing and services sectors. Third, we will encourage big-ticket consumption and focus on areas like education, cultural, and systems to strengthen overall financial support for services consumption. The fourth, we will ensure stable and orderly financing in real estate sector and follow the principle of housing is for living and not speculation. And we adopt tailored measures to implement differentiated housing credit policies, will ensure delivery of pre-sold homes, and protect lawful rights and interests of consumers. Will ensure solid implementation of the balance sheet improvement plan for quality real estate enterprises, and we will improve financial support policies on household rentals. Some more add up. You mentioned about the structural monetary policy instruments, which is of huge interest for society. And in recent years, we have the PBOC have focused on the two qualities of our monetary policy. That's the policy about the aggregate amount and the structural function, and use a lot of the instruments. So generally speaking, our policy focused on key areas at a appropriate scale, and they were moves both forward and backward. By the end of last year, outstanding structural monetary policy instruments stood at around 6.4 trillion yuan, and it is leaning toward key areas and weak links, and we're guiding financial institutions to offer loans at an appropriate scale. This has played a positive role in maintaining stable growth of credit and overall economic stability. Our instruments mainly focused on inclusive financing, green development, and SNT innovation. And relevant information are put on our website, and we welcome your interest. Now we are starting the introduction of further introduction of instruments. For example, on real estate sector, to ensure delivery of pre-sold homes, to support private businesses. And once these measures are introduced, we will give more detailed briefing and introduction. Thank you. Next question. Thank you. The data show that in December last year, aggregate financing continued to decrease. New aggregate finance continued to decrease year on year. So, what is the factor behind that? And how do you assess the performance of aggregate financing in 2022?
You asked two questions. You asked about aggregate financing for the month of December, and you also asked about for the whole year. I will respond to the December situation. In December, the increase in aggregate financing was 1.31 trillion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 1.05 trillion yuan, as you just mentioned. This decrease is mainly due to the relatively large decrease in bond financing. On the one hand, in December, government bond financing was 280.9 billion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 886.5 billion yuan. This is primarily because in the first 11 months of this year, government bond was issued quite a lot. So this year's issuance was mainly done in the previous months. In the first 11 months, there was 6.84 trillion yuan. It shows great support for the real economy. On the other hand, the yield of the bond market has risen. In December, the net decrease of corporate bond financing was 488.7 billion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 705.4 billion yuan. Although aggregate financing increased less year-on-year, we should note that the RMB loans issued by financial institutions to the real economy increased. In December, it increased by 1.44 trillion yuan. That's an increase of 405.1 billion yuan year-on-year. So that means that credit support for the real economy has continued to increase. If you look at the overall situation for the whole year, new aggregate financing was 32.01 trillion yuan. That's up 668.9 billion yuan from last year. So financial support for the real economy is quite strong. If we look at the structure, first, credit support of financial institutions for the real economy has been strengthened. In 2022, RMB loans issued by financial institutions to the real economy increased by 20.91 trillion yuan, up 974.6 billion yuan year-on-year. Second, the net financing of government bonds maintained steady growth. In 2022, the net financing was 7.12 trillion yuan, up 107.4 billion yuan year-on-year. Third, off-balance sheet financing decreased quite a lot. I would note the word off-balance sheet, and the situation is that the decrease was relatively large. In 2022, entrusted loans increased by 357.9 billion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 527.5 billion yuan. Trust loans decreased by 600.3 billion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 1.41 trillion yuan. Undiscounted bank acceptances decreased by 341.1 billion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 150.5 billion yuan. In addition, corporate bond and stock financing increased slightly in 2022. For the former, it was 2.05 trillion yuan, a year-on-year decrease of 1.24 trillion yuan, and for the latter, 1.18 trillion yuan, roughly the same as the previous year. Next question, please.
谢谢主持人，香港紫金杂志记者提问，请问2022年全年房地产信贷增长情况如何？之前召开的信贷座谈会提出将实施改善。
My question is, how was the real estate credit growth for the whole year last year, and what will be the new policies for stabilizing the real estate sector?
谢谢您的提问。
Thank you for your question. The virtuous cycle in the real estate sector is important to the development of economic growth. The Central Economic Work Conference made it clear that we should ensure the steady growth of the sector and meet the reasonable financing needs. We should diffuse the risks of top-notch, industry-leading sectors and meet the people's needs for basic living for basic housing and improved living conditions. We should stick to the position that houses are for living in, not for speculation, and promote the steady transition in the sector. With regard to the changes in the sector, we have followed the guidance and plans of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council and made efforts from both the supply and the demand side. As the policy effects are increasingly showing, we have found that in the real estate sector recently, in particular for the financing situation of top-notch or quality enterprises, the situation is improving. The developmental financing for the real estate sector grew 170 billion yuan from September to November last year. That's up quite a great deal. And bond issuance was more than 1,200 billion yuan. That's an increase of 22% year-on-year. In accordance with the plans of the Central Economic Work Conference, the PBC has also worked with relevant departments for a plan to improve the balance sheets of quality real estate enterprises. We also had a work symposium, and this was an important part of the symposium. Because if you look at the information disclosed by the enterprises over the past decade, the Chinese real estate sector has seen a growing balance sheet. Over the decade, the top 50 real estate enterprises saw their capital grow 10 times, some of them as much as 23 times. If you look at their liabilities, it's highly diversified across the sector. Financial liability or debt accounts for only 31% of the total. Developmental debt or loans, 14%. Bonds from outside China, 9%. What about the rest? That's mainly the money provided by upstream and downstream enterprises. And 32% was contributed by the house buyers who paid in advance. Now we are preventing the risks from spreading from quality enterprises to other enterprises. So we have put forward an action plan to implement this principle. This plan focuses on quality real estate companies that are systemically important. And we hope to, and we have 21 priority tasks. We will take multi-pronged measures to improve their capital flow and to direct them to return to a safe zone. In so doing, we need to implement well the existing policies and establish special relending, as well as a program for renting housing. With regard to the eligibility of the quality enterprises, that is not made clear. It will be determined by the financial institutions. As for the four-tier rules that is of interest to many of you, while ensuring the stability of the overall regulatory framework, we will improve the specific parameters. So much for my answer. Thank you.
请继续提问。后面吧，后面对这位男记者。
谢谢主持人。日本经济新闻记者提问：从2022年12月起，这种统计数据的流动中现金
Starting from December,
流动中数字人民币，请问
M0 has included digital currency, digital RMB. What is the significance of this new development, and what does it have to do with the future issuance of the digital RMB?
Thank you very much for your question. Well, digital RMB is a digital legal tender introduced by the PBOC. Just like actual RMB, it is in essence a part of our currency. So from a statistical and a managerial perspective, it is necessary for us to put them under the same scheme for analysis and management. In recent years, as our trials of digital currency go deeper, there are more scenarios in which the digital RMB can be used, and the stock volume and amount of transaction has increased continuously. So now, with our improved statistical and managerial system, it is better for us to put it into M0 to better understand the scale of our currency in circulation. By the end of last year, the digital RMB in circulation stood at 13.61 billion yuan, and now with it incorporated in M0, the year-on-year growth of M0 was 15.3%. And in accordance with the 14th five-year plan, the PBOC will orderly advance the trials and research on digital RMB and continue to improve the top-level design and the building of ecosystem. We welcome interest in this area and will continue to release relevant information in a timely manner to the public. Next question. Tianmu News. Private sector economy was mentioned in previous questions. The two unswerving commitments was stressed at the Central Economic Work. So my question is that what measures will the PBOC take to support the private economic sector?
Thank you for your question. I know this question is of great concern to many across society. We understand that in recent years, due to the repeated impact of COVID-19 and the unstable international situation, China's economy has faced greater downward pressure, and private enterprises have faced greater difficulties in their operation. The PBC, in accordance with the decisions of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council, have taken an innovative approach to structural monetary policy instruments and continue to improve the financing environment for small and micro enterprises. Just now, my colleague have briefed you on the situation in detail. Let me add 2 points. The inclusive loans to small and micro firms have grown at more than 20% for 4 years straight. And last November, the weighted average interest rate for such loans was 4.9%, which is a relatively low level historically. We have been able to maintain such high growth for so long, and this is no mean feat. This is due to financial support for them. And it can be said that financial support has provided important buttress and safeguards for the small and micro firms to survive the harsh winter. So, with COVID behind us, we expect to see an upturn in the situation. Going forward, the PBC will conscientiously implement the plans made at the Central Economic Work Conference, take a problem-oriented approach, and focus on the concerns of people. We will treat enterprises of all types of ownership as equals and provide an even greater financial environment for private firms. First, we will step up credit support for private, small, and micro firms. We will make good use of the structural instruments that I just mentioned and to extend the support provided to them, because we understand that with the adjustment of COVID response policies, they will need a period of time to recover. So we will provide and extend our support. Second, we will expand the bond financing scale. As my colleague just mentioned, there has been a decrease in December. In November 2022, we improved our policy, and going forward, we will continue to improve our working mechanism and provide greater support. Third, we will further improve financial services for these enterprises. Some banks tell me that they can issue a loan worth some million of yuan in like 1 second, so that requires better financial services. Fourth, we need to promote the sound development of the platform enterprises. They have made a rectification a while ago, and most of them have achieved positive outcome in this work. Going forward, we will make sure that this rectification is followed through on, and at the same time improve regular oversight. Thank you.
谢谢封面新闻记者提问。中央经济工作会议提出要确保房地产市场
The Central Economic Work Conference
这些措施确保房地产市场平稳发展。有观点认为应该
promoted the steady development of the real estate sector.
房地产市场。
Some opinions point out that we should reduce interest rates, especially mortgage rates. What is the view of the PPC?
Thank you for your question. About your first question, I think I partly responded to this question in a previous question, so I will mainly respond to the question on interest rate. The policy on mortgage interest rate will have impact on the interest rates reported by commercial banks, and that will have a direct impact on monthly mortgage of the buyers. That is a very important issue. At the end of last year's September, the PBOC and Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission introduced a notice saying that eligible local governments can independently decide whether to provisionally maintain, reduce, or cancel the floor of mortgage interest rate for first home buyers. According to the new statistics we have collected in December, the interest rate stood at 4.26% for newly lent loans for personal housing, was 1.37 percentage points down year on year, and that was the lowest point since 2008. This new adjustment was about a dynamic adjustment mechanism for new loans introduced for first home buyers. This was made because our previous moves had good results. And now we'll dynamically adjust the list of cities that are allowed to adopt the new policy. The Statistic Bureau of the NDRC will release information on the situation in 70 major cities on a monthly basis. And we also did analysis of these data about the 70 cities. We have found a regular turbulence of housing prices. If there is a upward trend or downward trend that lasts for more than 3 months, that shows an overall trend of the housing market in the city. So we are analyzing the changes in housing prices on a quarterly basis. But our adjustment for the list of eligible cities is less frequent than the report by the Statistics Bureau. That means we have maintained have more policy stability and consistency in this regard. What we aim to do is to enable local governments that have real estate enterprises facing strong difficulties address the issues they face, at the same time manage relevant risks. That is my response to your question. Next question. First, Taijing News. In past 2 years, what measures have been done in financial regulators to promote the rectification of platform enterprises? What progress has been made, and what is the future policy direction? I will let Mr. Ma Zhou answer this question. In my previous answer, I briefly talked about platform enterprises, so allow me to add a few points. Since November 2020, the PBOC, the Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission, and Securities Regulatory Commission guided 14 major platform enterprises, including ant groups, to address acute problems such as unlicensed operations, regulatory arbitrage, disorderly expansion, and infringement of consumer rights. And we have made positive outcomes in these rectification campaigns. And so far, most of the issues have been addressed and rectified. And the major platform enterprises have a stronger sense of responsibility in operating in compliance, fair competition, and protection of consumer rights. And their financial operations are more regulated. At the same time, we have introduced a series of documents on third-party payment, individual credit reporting, internet-based depositing and lending, and securities and funds. This has set a basic framework for regular regulation of financial services of platform enterprises and lay a sound foundation for future work. Going forward, we will follow the decisions made by the 20th Party Congress and the Central Economic Work, continue to attach equal importance to development and regulatory compliance to promote the sound and healthy development of platform economy. First, we will urge relevant enterprises to finish the remaining rectification tasks. Second, we will strengthen regular monitoring and supervision and hold zero tolerance for illegal financial activities. Third, we will explore ways to explore financial policies and measures to promote healthy development of platform economy, to support platform enterprises in conducting S&T innovation and improving the quality of their services so that they can create more jobs, lead development, and be more competitive in international competition. Next question. CCTV. Are there any forecasts and preparations from the PBOC for possible interest rate hike of Federal Reserve in 2023 and its spillover effect? Will RMB continue to appreciate in the following months? In 2022, major advanced economies such as the United States and the United Kingdom tightened their monetary policies. And this has caused the tightening of the international financial market. We are facing the pressure of outbound capital flow. The market has some expectation for interest hike of the Federal Reserve in 2023, but China has a huge economic aggregate and strong resilience. Since the beginning of pandemic, China has stuck to a normal monetary policy and did not resort to massive stimulus. Instead, we focused on cross-cyclical adjustment design and to maintain reasonably sufficient liquidity, and the financial support for the real economy is stronger than ever. Our financial system's autonomy and stability has improved, the expectation for RMB exchange rate is stable. And these are helpful for us to buffer against external risks. And going forward, we'll continue to adopt a holistic approach and take active measures and prudent measures to respond to the monetary policy adjustments of advanced economies. We'll put stability front and center and adopt appropriate intensity and tempo of our prudent monetary policy to strengthen the flexibility of RMB exchange rate, and will guide market entities to embrace risk neutrality and strengthen macro-prudential regulation and cross-border capital flow. We'll keep the RMB exchange rate basically stable at an adaptive and a balanced level. About RMB exchange rates, since November last year, with the implementation of policy package for stabilizing economy and optimization of our COVID response, and also with the market having expectation about tapering of Federal Reserve's interest hike, the dollar index has decreased from a high point. RMB is gradually appreciating against the dollar. And of course, the RMB exchange rate is affected by many factors, such as risk appetite, international balance of payment, and domestic and foreign financial situations. So, short-term forecasts are destined to fail. But generally speaking, we have sound fundamentals. Given the dimming economic prospects of other major economies, the growth in China's trade surplus will decline somewhat, and with multiple factors, the exchange rate of RMB will generally be kept stable. And with a deeper and broader foreign exchange market, China's RMB exchange rate is more flexible and a market expectation is more stable. We are confident that we can keep it generally stable. Next question. Xinhua News Agency. The inflation pressure in some countries have triggered market concerns, and some other central banks had raised concern at the same time. So how will the PBOC respond to inflation risks and pressure in the next year?
If you look at the report of the monetary policy for the third quarter, we understand that it has been under quite heated discussion. As our governor has just mentioned, last year, if you look at the global situation, there was a wave of high inflation, unprecedented over decades. In quite stark contrast, in China, we have maintained prices at a basically stable situation. This is no mean feat. And if you look back for a longer period of time, over the past 5 years or the past decade, China's CPI has grown at roughly only 2% on average each year. This fully speaks to the strength of our socialist system and the effectiveness of our macro regulation. This is due to us implementing the plans and decisions of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council and coordinating the stability of supply and prices in key areas such as energy and food. It is also due to a prudent and normal monetary policy without resorting to mass stimulus, thus creating a sound monetary and financial environment for stable prices. In 2023, we expect China's inflation to remain at quite mild levels, but we also are following the potential or the possibility of a rebound in inflation. On the one hand, our supply is relatively sufficient. Demand is recovering. We have not overissued currency, so inflation is expected to remain at a stable level. As we speak, the Chinese economy is still recovering. The supply chain and industrial chains are operating quite smoothly. The primary tension has to do with effective demand. In the short term, the inflationary pressure is quite manageable. In the medium to long term, China is a major producer in the world. Our supply and demand in our economy is quite balanced. Our monetary policy is prudent, is sound, and the household and the people's expectation or anticipation of inflation is quite stable. On the other hand, there are still uncertainties, so we cannot be off guard about the possibility of an inflation. We need to follow the trend closely. For some time now, M2 has grown at quite a high level, and there is the possibility that its impact on prices will only show in the later stages. As COVID response policies are improved, the potential of consumption is being tapped and released, so that may lead to some inflationary pressure. On the international front, geopolitical conflict is still causing disruption to global energy supply. Major economies are seeing quite high inflation, so we need to be alert to the import of inflation. Going forward, we will continue to pursue progress while ensuring stability, ensure the integration of both the expansion of consumption strategy and the supply-side structural reform. We will focus on maintaining stable growth, employment, and prices, and work to improve the effective upgrade in quality and reasonable growth in quantity of the economy. Last question, please. At the end of December, M2 grew by 11.8% year-on-year, up 2.8 percentage points compared to the same period last year. What is the reason for M2 remaining at quite a high level of growth, and how should we perceive its future development trend? Thank you for your question. If we look at the statistics released at the end of 2022, M2 stood at 266.43 trillion yuan, up 11.8% year-on-year. This growth rate, compared to November of 2022, was 0.6 percentage points lower, and it was 2.8 percentage points higher year-on-year. The M2 grew at quite a high, fast speed, primarily because financial institutions have stepped up capital support for the real economy, so derivative money has increased. First, financial institutions' bond investment have increased by quite a great deal. Last year, the figure stood at 6.92 trillion yuan, up 1.58 trillion year-on-year. Government bond investment grew by 1.39 trillion. Second, RMB loans have steadily increased. Last year, the figure was 2.31 trillion yuan, up 1.36 trillion yuan year-on-year. Third, investment in equity and other forms of investment have grown by quite a large quantity. Last year, equity investment and other forms of investment grew 522.5 billion yuan. That's 566.3 billion yuan more year-on-year. In addition, the PBC turned over to the state 1.13 trillion yuan in profit, adding to the fiscal budget, which through fiscal spending will boost the growth of M2 by around 0.5 percentage points. This year, the PBC will resolutely implement the guiding principles of the 20th CPC National Congress and the Central Economic Work Conference. Our prudent monetary policy will remain targeted and robust, and we will maintain our credit support for the real economy. We expect the M2 to grow at a steady rate and contribute to the reasonable sufficient liquidity across society. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This is the end of today's conference. Goodbye.